Do I look presentable enough?
You do look presentable.
I've just finished work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have your main job is actually with the EWF.
That's my passion, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just going to start right away, unless you would like to begin with your usual prayer.
Yes, I think that would be appropriate. I'm just going to lift up the laptop so it's a bit higher so that I'm not looking down on you.
Okay.
That would be better. How is that?
That's fine.
Is that okay? Shall I go back a little bit or am I all right?
It looks okay to me.
All right. Very good. Okay. Shall we start with a prayer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to recite what I believe to be is a great Pan-African prayer. It's coming from 1880s, 1890s, from our ancestors. So glory to word, glory to sound, glory to the power of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie Jah Rastafari. Princes and princesses must come out of Babylon. Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands and heart unto Rastafari. Although thy divine majesty, thy eyes came into I and I heart to dwell in the path of righteousness. Help I and I to forgive, so that I and I may be forgiven. Teach I and I love with loyalty, as it is in Mount Zion. Endow I and I with thy wise mind, knowledge, and understanding to do thy will. Thy blessing to I and I, that the hungry be fed, the naked clothed, the sick nourished, the aged protected, and the infants cared for. I deliver I and I from the hands of I and I enemies, so that I and I may prove fruitful, not only in this day, but also in the last day, when I and I enemies are passed away and decay, in the depths of the sea, or in the depths of the earth, or in the bowels of the beast, or in the lake of fire. O divine and all, a place in thy righteous kingdom. Haile Selassie Jah Rastafari. Mesamab Bawol Bamenfes Kadis Ahudama Sila. Give thanks, Brother Gavin. Give thanks, Brother Trevor, for this great opportunity.
I think you're on mute. Hello.
I can hear you. Oh.
You can hear us, Trevor.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
You can hear us, Trevor. Okay. Okay. I was saying, jump in whenever you want with your own questions.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'd like to ask you, Ambrose, how you got involved in the EWF. You were born in the UK, I believe. So what's the story of your journey from there to where you are at the moment?
Okay, so I was born in the UK many decades ago. Grew up first in Birmingham, and then at the age of 8, moved to London. I was grown up by my 2 aunties on my father's side. They were both teachers. So my father thought it was best that he send me to London under the tutelage of his 2 sisters who were teachers. So they brought me up from the age of 8. I lived in northwest London, a place called Neasden, near Willesden and Harlesden. Large black population. and went to school. Didn't take school very seriously until the last couple of years. Managed to get some GSEs, as they used to call them. And with that, I got an apprenticeship for woodwork, became a carpenter with a leading construction company at the time known as Kyle Stewart. And then I went to Taylor Woodrow and went to day school, night school, got my City and Guilds, Advance, and then went on to what was known as supplementary studies. And then I decided this thing is quite easy, just to regurgitate what they teach you and pass. So once I got into the routine of regurgitating what they teach you, I decided to continue my studies and went to technical college, block release, day release. I was employed by Sir Robert McAlpine, and they employed me as a junior engineer, building engineer on one of their sites. Actually, it was a site, very famous construction, Liverpool Street, the East India Dock warehouses, which was the old warehouses owned by the tea company known as East India. So the Mayor of London placed a historical order on these warehouses, several of them massive. So the historical order meant that we were not allowed to demolish the facades. So we had to demolish the roof and the slabs all the way down to the ground floor and excavate and build new foundations, new slab, new columns and beams, and pin them to the existing facades. So this was quite challenging for a young engineer, and I proved myself. Graduated as a building engineer in 1981. Then decided to open up my own business in construction. At that time, they changed their housing policy in South London. A lot of these houses, ground plus first floor, built during the Victorian time. Instead of demolishing them and building skyscrapers, they decided to refurbish them and modernize them as maisonettes, ground floor and first floor. So I managed to win a tender to refurbish one of these ground plus first floor maisonettes, and I employed majority of Black tradesmen, and we had a good working team. And when we completed our first masonette, I was recommended for several more. So I was with work by recommendation for several years, earned a little bit of money. And then in 1982, I visited Ethiopia briefly, and then I returned to Ethiopia in 1988 with my young family, 2 boys at that time, Johannes and Georgis, aged 2 and 4 respectively, and my queen, and we came home to Ethiopia. As a young teenager, when I was going to night school and day release, learning the trade, I became influenced by the Rastafari movement, and I used to visit one of the Rasta mansions in South London known as St. Agnes Place, better known as Rastafari International, and also 12 Tribes of Israel. And through this organization, we moved on to wanting to unite the Black race, not just the Rastafari movement, but the Black race. And so in 1981, we convened a conference at Brixton Town Hall. Sorry, 1980, 23rd July, Brixton Town Hall. We called a conference calling all Black people to come together for us to reason on what is the best way that we can effect global unity. So out of that conference, July 23rd, 1980, we decided to revitalize the Ethiopian World Federation, which was a constitution given to the Black peoples of the world way back in 1937. So I became international organizer, and I traveled all over England, many states in America, and also France, setting up locals of the Federation. So that's basically how I came to be a member of the Ethiopian World Federation and how I became to stay here in Ethiopia. Yes, Gavin, back to you.
Okay, well, that's an interesting journey. So once you got to Ethiopia, how did you manage to sustain yourself? Did you continue to work in carpentry, or did you work full-time with the EWF?
Well, when I came to Ethiopia, I was already a graduate of Willesden Technology College as a building engineer employed by Sir Robert McAlpines. And when I came to Ethiopia with my queen, she also was a professional, a teacher with a BA degree in teaching. So when I came, I couldn't get employment, neither as a building engineer or as a carpenter. I didn't really try to get work as a carpenter. I tried to get work as an engineer, but I wasn't successful. But my wife, she was successful in getting employed at the British International School in Ethiopia, especially in Addis Ababa, since the time of His Majesty, when His Majesty was Minister of Education for 3 5-year terms. He had brought to Ethiopia through the embassies of European countries, such as Britain, France, Italy, Germany, and America, schools, international schools. And they used to enroll Ethiopian students as well as the children of expatriates of their respective country. So there was a very famous English international school, and my queen was successful in gaining employment as a teacher. She became head of the infants department, and for seven years, the first 7 years that we lived here, basically she was the breadwinner. She was the one bringing in the money into the family. Upon the 7th year of living in Ethiopia, I got employment with an international NGO to project manage construction of several mother and child health care centers. Since that time, I've never been out of work for more than 3-4 months. My work has been mainly project managing high-end construction in Addis Ababa. So that's how we managed to survive.
And do you use your engineering work to help fund the EWF, or does it get funding from elsewhere?
Well, I'm very passionate about the EWF, and I've used a lot of my personal funds to keep us going. But what we did in 1982 was to register the constitution of the organization with the not-for-profit charities ministry here in Ethiopia. That gave us the advantage of soliciting funds from funding agencies, both here at Ethiopia and also internationally. So it's a voluntary organization, so the passionate ones who are members have had to dig into their pockets, but the whole objective is really to seek funding. And the way we seek funding is by compiling project proposals and then submitting these project proposals to funding agencies, and try to get funding to implement those projects. So this is how we've been surviving here in Ethiopia as a registered not-for-profit charitable organization.
Would you say that the projects are very much based in Ethiopia rather than, or do they have an international dimension?
In the 1980s, when we first registered, it was with an international perspective, but it wasn't officially recognized as an international not-for-profit charitable organization until the year 2002. That was the year that we registered at an international level. There are two categories for registration of NGOs or CSOs. One is at the local level, meaning that you're only permitted to operate within Ethiopia. And the other is at the international level, meaning you can solicit funds from international, and you can bring in what they call expatriates to implement those projects. So it wasn't until 2002 that we officially registered as an international organization. And our project that we put forward to the government of Ethiopia was to establish a model city on the land granted to us since 1948. A model city to house 1 million families, 500,000 from the diaspora, and 500,000 indigenous population. So it is an international registration, and the reason for that is because our constitution is international in scope. I could talk a lot more about the constitution. Back to you, Gavin.
Okay, how is the project going? It obviously sounds like a big project, getting people together from abroad and in Ethiopia to build an international city. But can you say a bit more about that?
Sure. Repatriation has been the cry of the Rastaman for decades. And the Rastaman used to have a famous slogan or lyrics, which was, the only black man redemption is repatriation. And that is what we are most famous for, repatriation.
Okay.
So the history of the organization has a lot to do with a piece of land granted to the black peoples of the world in 1948. That land is known as Shashamane. It was 500 acres for 500 families to come from the diaspora and develop that 500-acre land grant. And when it was fully developed, more land would have been given. This land was a gift, a way of saying thank you to the Black peoples of the world that helped Ethiopia defeat fascism, namely the Italian-Ethiopian War of 1936 to 1941. So the history of that land is a very, very long story, very human life, great story that needs to be told. But just to shorten it, a revolution came in 1974. The Derg communism took over and ruled for 17 years. Up until 1974, it had only been a few families that took up the offer to leave the West and come home to Ethiopia and develop this land grant called Shashamane. Just a few families. And the majority of those families were from the Rastafari movement. Then 1974 revolution came. A lot of those pioneering settlers became afraid and left Ethiopia. But the few that remained, they petitioned the Derg government to respect the blood that has been spilt by our forefathers in defense of Ethiopians' integrity. Fortunately, there were some members of the Derg, the ruling Communist Party, who knew very well the history of our organization and the land grant. So they decided to issue a proclamation granting 2.2 hectares to each of the surviving settlers. So those surviving settlers, we, the Rastafari movement, specifically in England, reached out to them, communicated with them to see what opportunities there were still existing as regards repatriating to Shashamane. And so from that, it built up over the years until people like myself started to return to Ethiopia. And then now we said, well, this vision by the founding fathers of a model city is what we have to fulfill. And so we went about compiling a project proposal to establish that model city on that land grant called Shashamane. Cut a long story short, I personally have been involved very much in compiling a project proposal entitled Climate Resilient Green Economic Communities. Climate Resilient Green Economic Communities. Basically, it is a compilation of our experience here in Ethiopia and the vision of our founding fathers and the ultimate goal of repatriation and Black man redemption. Now, the future as we see it, which is being prophesied both biblically and verbally and lyrically by the Rastafari movement, is coming true. Babylon is falling. Ethiopia is calling. Repatriation is still the only Black man redemption. Come out of her, my people, lest you go down with her judgment. These are lyrics, as you might call them, but it's also prophecies that are fulfilling. If we're conscious and our third eye is open, we can see blatantly how Babylon is sinking. Now is the time for Africa and African people to rise to the occasion. So we've put together a project proposal entitled Climate Resilient Green Economic Communities, whereby we want to establish communities, farming communities, in the rural areas of the borough of Shashamane that can utilize all the green technology, solar energy, wind pump energy, biogas energy. All these different green technologies should be used on a village scale, and we establish farming communities whereby each family should be entitled to house and garden. They would be given a certain area. It could be as much as 10 acres. 1 acre would be for their personal house and garden, and the other 9 acres they would utilize in cooperation with their neighbors and cooperatively farm it and cultivate it. This, we believe, is the future international order, not New World Order, but international order that has been established by our founding fathers. We know that we have to go back to the earth and live in harmony with Mother Nature, not against nature, but in harmony with nature, as it was prescribed by our Creator from the very beginning. But we must utilize the energy of the earth with green technologies such as the solar energy, wind pump energy, biogas energy, so on and so forth, to our advantage, and establish modern rural farming communities. This, we believe, is the new international order that we, Black people of the world, are going to establish. Now, as it was in the beginning, so it shall be in the end. This is prophecy fulfilling on a global basis. So international in scope is what the organization is. And we now have a proposal entitled Climate Resilient Green Economic Communities. Now, 5 years ago, we took that proposal first to the previous mayor of Shashamane town for his endorsement. He endorsed the project. We then took it to the administrator of Shashamane borough. He endorsed the project. We then took it to the president of the Oromo region. Ethiopia is divided into 14 regions. Shashamane falls in the region of Oromia. So we went to the president of Oromia region. He also endorsed the project. Then we took the project to the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia government, the federal government of Ethiopia. They also endorsed the project. We didn't stop there, Gavin. We went then to the African Union, and they also endorse the project proposal. So I have in my hands today project proposal to establish these green farming communities that is endorsed by 3 African governments: the Oromo government, the federal government of Ethiopia, and the African Union. Now, what we want to do, spread the word about this endorsed project to the race and let them know this is it. Our repatriation is not going to come by a miracle. It's going to come by us developing the continent. So this is a project of development that can bring all the required professions from the West back home to Ethiopia to establish green farming communities that will be inhabited by 50% people from the West or the diaspora and 50% people indigenous. And this green project can be replicated all over Ethiopia and all over the continent because it's endorsed by the African Union for that very same purpose. It's endorsed by the Ethiopian government for that very same purpose. So I think I should stop there and allow you to ask the next question, Gavin.
Yeah, it sounds like it is a model that can be used elsewhere. And it also sounds as though you should have some sort of let me unmute Trevor in case he wants to ask any questions. He can unmute himself. Yeah, but it sounds as though it is something that there should really be a documentary on, to be honest. And is there something like that in the works?
Very good question, Gavin. You know, the stone that the builder refused, that's how we feel. We feel like we're the stone that the builder refused. But we're confident that with publicity, the right publicity, we will become the head cornerstone.
Okay.
So there's nothing in the works to publicize this. I mean, I'm an engineer, I'm not a media man, so to speak. So it's by providence that we've now connected first with Brother Trevor and now with you and Brother Malik for the purpose of publicizing the work that the race must engage itself in now to save itself from annihilation. So the short answer is no, there's nothing in the works yet to publicize what we're doing. A documentary would be brilliant.
Okay. Now, I think that there is something that, I don't know if you would want to talk about it, but Ethiopia has its problems. It has its problems with an ongoing war, a pretty terrible war. Is there anything that you can say about that? Are you permitted to talk about it? Because I can understand that it might be difficult, given that you have a relationship with Ethiopian officials and government and so forth. But what's your view?
I'm very proud of our elected Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed. I think he's a sincere brother who is also a Pan-Africanist, and he is fighting for Ethiopia's continued independence. The war that you speak of, Brother Gavin, is a proxy war being led by America and Western Europe to divide and conquer Ethiopia and ultimately the continent. Now, Gavin, you have to realize that Ethiopia is the jewel in the crown. Ethiopia has been leading the march of the black man. That's why in 1896, Italy first tried to conquer Ethiopia, and they were resoundingly defeated at the Battle of Adwa, led by Emperor Menelik II and his queen, Empress Tayutu. 1896, Ethiopia was only the last free, independent black country on the continent, and Europe didn't like that. So Italy tried to conquer and were resoundingly beaten. Between that time and 1928, His Imperial Majesty, King Tafari, as he was known then because he had not yet assumed the throne, he had the foresight to realize that the world was modernizing and their weapons were becoming more and more sophisticated, and that Ethiopia needed to join the civilizing club known then as the League of Nations. And in 1928, he fulfilled all the criteria to become a member of the League of Nations. One of the criteria was to abolish slavery. Slavery was here in Ethiopia. It wasn't the chattel slavery of Africa implemented by the Europeans. It was a different kind of slavery, but nonetheless, it was slavery. So His Majesty abolished slavery. And when the League of Nations saw that, yes, it was truly abolished, they allowed Ethiopia to become a member of the League. Now, the League at that time was all Europeans, white people. And here comes now this little man, short in stature, who was a diplomat, educated, could speak fluent French and a little bit of English. And he managed to enter the only Black free independent nation into the white-ruled League of Nations. He did that in the hope that the League would live up to its covenant called collective security. But the League didn't live up to its covenant. Collective security simply means if there are 12 of us or 20 of us or 50 of us members of a group, and another person should come in amongst the group and start to victimize one of our members and beat that member up and abuse that member, then the other 49 members out of the 50 membership would rally around the victim and oust the aggressor. That system is known as collective security. But what happened in the case of Ethiopia is that Britain, France, and Italy together colluded to use the Suez Canal, to use the French territory known as French Somaliland, and to use the Italian territory known as Italian Somaliland and invade Ethiopia without announcing war and occupy Ethiopia and then split it amongst the three of them, Britain, France, and Italy. That's what they did on the 5th of October, 1935, invaded Ethiopia. And they had to use tanks, airplanes, modern guns, modern armaments, not only armaments, but mustard gas in order to defeat the valiant warriors, women warriors as well, of Ethiopia. And so after the war, His Majesty went to the League of Nations. That time their headquarters was in Geneva, and he made a very prophetic speech on the 30th of June, 1936, after fighting on the front line for more than 18 months. He's the last king of any nation to risk his life by being on a front line. There is film footage of him in the trenches, mounting anti-aircraft gun and shooting down Italian aeronautics. There is film footage of him visiting a Red Cross camp in Desi. And when the Italian aeronautics heard that he was visiting the camp, they sent out 12 airplanes and bombed the camp with all the victims and all the patients. But they were unable to kill him. And there's a famous photograph of His Majesty standing on a pile of unexploded bombs with his foot on top of them. Anyway, he was the last king of any country to risk his neck by defending his country in the front lines. He went to Geneva, 1936, 30th of June, and made a prophetic speech where he told the world, international morality is at stake. It's us today, it will be you tomorrow. The match that is struck in Ethiopia will burn Europe. Why? Because they didn't live up to their covenant. They had no morality. They were liars and thieves. from the very beginning. And so they betrayed Ethiopia because of greed and racism, where we have to call it what it is and what it was. Racism. They didn't want no free Black independent country in the world. They wanted to safeguard their possessions, which was the rest of the Black world. So because of racism, they colluded together and reneged on their covenant called collective security.
Okay.
So what happened? Hitler, realizing that the League of Nations was a joke, marched into Austria, marched into Czechoslovakia, marched into Poland, and continued his march. Then Britain realized that they got to put a stop to Hitler. Up until that time, Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of Britain. He was known as the Great Appeaser. He simply kept saying, oh, allow Hitler, allow him. He will not further his ambitions. But in 1938, there was an election. They ousted Chamberlain and they brought in Winston Churchill. By that time,
Okay.
when Britain, go ahead, Gavin.
No, the connection just got paused for a moment, but
Okay. Where did you?
Just when you were talking about Churchill coming in.
Yes, so 1936, His Majesty made the prophetic speech. Hitler started invading European countries. Britain did nothing under the tutelage of, what was his name? Chamberlain, until Germany started invading European countries, and also Austria and Czechoslovakia and Poland, and then started to threaten France. That is when Britain woke up, and Churchill won the election. And by that time, His Majesty was in exile in a place called Bath in England.
Okay.
And Winston Churchill, having realized that it's because of the weakness of the League of Nations and their betrayal of the covenant, remembered the prophetic speech His Majesty made 2 years earlier, went and visited His Majesty in Bath, England, and asked His Majesty advice on how to turn the tide on Hitler. By now, Hitler had invaded France and was going way up into Northern Europe and into Russia, and had reached the Channel. The British had to run from Dunkirk, leave all their arms and ammunition, and send boats and small ships to rescue the soldiers. And they came back over the Channel, and they were in Britain without any guns and any ammunition. Every night, the Luftwaffe was bombing all the major cities. So it was just a matter of time before Hitler would cross the Channel and invade Britain. At that time, Churchill appealed to His Majesty for his advice. His Majesty told him, give me the help and assistance I requested in the forms of weapons that I requested from the League to defend my country. And give me some generals and fly me back into Sudan, which was still a British colony, and fly me to southeast Sudan, near the border with Ethiopia. And give me 6 weeks, and I will call the Arbanyoch, that's the patriots. They'll cross the border. I'll give them weapons. I'll give them 6 weeks training. And then together with your generals, we'll go back into Ethiopia. And within another 6 weeks, I will liberate my capital, Addis Ababa. So said, so done. He also advised Churchill to befriend America and make an alliance with America, bring America into the war. He also advised Churchill to build wooden guns, paint them black, and put them round the coast. Meanwhile, his factories would be fabricating airplanes, guns and ammunition, etc., etc. So said, so done. Churchill gave His Majesty what he requested, flew His Majesty back. Now, His Majesty gave Churchill the strategy. He said, you've got to form a second front down south from the Horn of Africa. Help me liberate my country, and then you'll form a second front from the Horn of Africa down the Nile into Egypt, into Libya, into Morocco, and hence the Desert War, or the Desert Rats War, which the German General Rommel was famous for, and Montgomery. So they formed a second front, and then they organized D-Day, which was the front from the north. They crossed over the Channel and landed on the beaches of Normandy. At the same time, from the liberated Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, they launched the Desert Rats War. So it was a pincer movement. And with the help of America, they started to put Hitler and Italy and the Japanese on the back foot until they reached Europe, until they reached Rome, until they reached Berlin. So Churchill was very fond of Emperor Selassie. He recognized him as a very wise, high moral man. And so this is how Ethiopia was liberated. So it didn't stop there. What Ethiopia did then after the war is to help fund and train all the liberation movements of the continent, starting with Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, in the West, Nigeria, Gambia, Ghana, Sierra Leone. All of these liberation movements were funded and trained, including Nelson Mandela, South Africa. When Nelson was freed, his first country that he visited was Ethiopia. He came to the then called Organization of African Union, and with tears in his eyes, he recalled how he felt like a man for the first time when he came to Ethiopia as a young man and received training in military, what they call guerrilla warfare. By the way, guerrilla warfare was perfected in Ethiopia in her resistance against the fascists. So, cut a long story short, Ethiopia's liberation liberated the continent. Now the West understands that if Ethiopia is free and united, the continent will be strong. So the West has always tried to defeat Ethiopia in order to defeat Black independence. So this war that is going on now is another attempt by the West to conquer by subjugation, divide and rule tactics, the continent. Now, Ethiopia is growing very fast in her development. Her latest development scheme is to utilize the waters of the Blue Nile. Now, the Blue Nile, its source is here in the northern part of Ethiopia, a place called Lake Tana, which is where I'm located right now. I'm project managing a project, 5-star plus holiday resort, which is Ethiopia's Camp David. So America and Western Europe are organizing a proxy war in Ethiopia, divide and rule, in order to destabilize the continent. And the reason they're doing it is because they see that Ethiopia is going to become a powerhouse once this electricity is being generated from the dam being built within Ethiopia on the course of the Blue Nile. So that's as much as I need to say about the present war. Give time.
Okay, thank you for that history. I think that you know, you are a good historian, and you've explained that very well.
There's definitely a documentary in there or a film of some kind in
Yeah,
that explanation. But we'll talk about that in the future times.
yeah. I mean, what I'm getting is something which I think will help people understand the background and the importance of the EWF, and also I think put everything into context. I liked and I understand what you're saying about proxy wars. There's a long history of America and Britain sponsoring proxy wars and using divide and conquer. A problem is, of course, is that people allow themselves to be divided. And it seems to me that one of the most important things that any patriot, anyone who is concerned with humanity can do is see how we can use our efforts to promote peace and to counter the things which are being the way that we're being manipulated by the imperialists. And although it might seem a big thing, I see a connection there between this project that Trevor has proposed, an arts-based project, and a response to that division, which facilitates and is part of the proxy war. I think that, you know, art is a means of communication, and it can help bring people together. So, I mean, that's a small thought, but maybe it's something that can be part of the context of anything that we do. Okay, so I'm sure there's a lot more to be said about this, but there are a couple of questions that I would like to ask you, because I have an interest in religion and spirituality, and so I'll ask those questions. The first thing that struck me and that strikes me is the reverence for Haile Selassie. And is he considered to be to have the status of a prophet within Rastafarianism and within Ethiopia?
Very good question, Gavin. However, Black people or even humanity see His Imperial Majesty is a personal view.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, myself, I'm a Rastaman. So I see His Imperial Majesty as being divine. Let me put it that way. But in studying His Imperial Majesty, and in particular, his volumes of selected speeches, which he gave to prosperity to educate us in his mannerisms, I've learned from his selected speeches that religion is personal.
Mm-hmm.
State is for us all. I try to live up to that principle because religion is the cause of a lot of wars. I would rather we develop our personal spirituality and leave our religion to our personal aspirations or what we ever see as our religious perspective. But however you see His Imperial Majesty, whether you see him as a great statesman or a prophet or as divine or as a unifier or as a feudal monarch, as some people see him, is not the problem or is not significant in my opinion, because however you see him, you will get that just reward because he has lived a life by example. And when you study the history of this man's life, if you're not biased, you will have to agree that this was no ordinary man by any means, because he's performed some miracles that is recorded for prosperity. So however you see him, you'll get that just reward. Me personally, as a Rastaman, I see him as divine. So what I would promote to the Black race and humanity is to read about this man, learn about this man without any bias, and then form your own opinion how you see this man. But for me, if you have no bias as a Black man, you will see at the very least, he's a very great African leader. Mm-hmm. And also for humanity, he is recognized as the world's greatest diplomat, because he is the only head of state that has addressed both the League of Nations and today's United Nations. Now, the United Nations came into being because of the failure of the League of Nations. The failure of the League of Nations to defend Ethiopia's integrity resulted in the Second World War. The failure of today's United Nations is leading us into the Third World. His Majesty is the only head of state that has addressed both institutions, and he's given them the same message, basically, that they should eradicate racism. Mm-hmm. The UN of today is practicing racism. The UN of today is the New World Order, and they're bringing it in fast and sure. So we, adherents of morality, should learn about the history and the works of this great African leader and take example and learn even high diplomacy from him. Because as a young man, that's what really saved me. As a school student, that's what really opened my eyes to this system, because in school, in my early years, I was really rebelling. That's why my father sent me to London to see if his two sisters could straighten me out. And they couldn't straighten me out until the penny dropped at the age of 14. And it dropped because I started to move towards His Imperial Majesty and learn about him. Now, I'll just show you the wisdom of this great man in a speech that he gave in 1963 at the UN, where he stated, "Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another race inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes, until bigotry and racism is eradicated. I don't need to go any further, Gavin, because these words were made famous by a great Rastaman musician, Bob Marley. Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited. Everywhere is war, Mr. War. So those words made Bob famous. When Bob came to Ethiopia in 1977, he purchased one of those books entitled Selected Speeches of His Imperial Majesty. These books have chapters on every subject of life. So Bob was fortunate in buying an original, and from those words, he wrote such inspirational music. So I'm just giving you an example of the wisdom of this great African monarch, which Black people and humanity in general can learn a lot from. So religion is personal as far as I see, and that's what I try to practice. So we don't make that the issue. It's more spirituality that we need to cultivate in each and every one. And His Majesty has said that we are spiritual kinsmen. So that's what we're promoting.
I think that is brilliantly put. And so this is very much something that I would like to share. I know that I know many people who would be interested in this. So once this is edited, I will, and there's not much editing to do, but I will ask your permission to put this on YouTube. And I'd certainly like my grandson to see it. His name is Xavier, and I was actually intrigued by your reference to Xavier as a name for God, and I wanted to ask on his behalf where that comes from.
Xavier is the Amharic word for the creator. So we as Rasta, we study etymology and the meaning of words, and it's a system of words that Babylon has used to cast spells on us. Even the reason why they call it spelling. And they use the word God to describe Xavier, the creator. So we refrain from using those words because it's a spell that Babylon has cast on the people of the world in order to distract people from the creator. So Xavier means creator, and that's the word we prefer to use in place of the Babylon word God. Xavier means creator.
Okay, well, I think for me, that's it. I don't know if Trevor has any additional questions or comments.
Yeah. Brother Ambrose, something that stuck with me when I came to stay with you, you kept going on about a common goal. It's not about religion. My phone's just gone off. Hold on. Yeah, I wanted you to explain more about this common goal and why it's so important. And then after that, I had a question about the project. and that will be it.
Very good question, Brother Trevor. What the organization is about is unity. In particular, unity of the Black race. That's what we are about, without any apology. It's the Black race that needs to unite to save humanity. Why? Because we are the first people. God was Black, Ethiopia was Black, and he made man and woman in his own image, Black. So out of the Black first man and woman comes civilization that went down the Nile to Egypt and Sudan and those places. But now, in this 21st century, and for the last 2,000 years, Black man and Black woman have been relegated to the bottom of the social ladder. And at the bottom of that social ladder is another social ladder amongst the Black race, where the Rasta man is at the bottom. So we are the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. We are the very last stone that the builder refused. Yet out of us comes this quest to effect unity, first amongst the Black race, and then amongst the human family. So the goal is unity. That's our goal, a common goal, unity. We want to effect unity. But how do we effect it? Well, we believe we have the answer, Brother Trevor, Brother Gavin.
Okay.
The answer is, since slavery, we've never practiced governing ourselves as a nation. We've been sent all over the earth and called all kinds of different names: African Americans, Negroes, West Indians, South Blacks, South Americans, Latinos. What's the other word they use in the European? I can't remember the word now. Black British and French British and Anglophone and Francophone. And we've been divided into all kinds of different names, Aborigines and who knows what not. Divided us along religious lines and all the rest of it. So what we have in common is to effect unity amongst the Black race, which will lead to the uniting of the human family. We want to see peace and love, but that peace and love in the human family can't come without first justice. No justice, no peace. That's the slogan. So what we are fighting for is justice. We're not fighting against flesh and blood. We come to fight against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's what we come to fight against. So the teaching of His Majesty is, let us effect this unity. Now, when His Majesty liberated Ethiopia and then embarked upon liberating the continent, and in 1963, he called the 33 independent states to Addis Ababa to form the Charter of the Organization of African Unity. The rest of the world said he was crazy. They said it would never happen. And even the heads of state visiting Addis Ababa in Africa whole, they said to His Majesty, because they all respected him, they said, how, Your Majesty, are we going to effect this unity? Look how Babylon has divided us with religion, with language, with borders, with this, that. And His Majesty gave them the principle to effect unity. And this is it. If we have 100 issues, and we're arguing about the 100 issues, and out of the 100 issues, we find one issue that we all agree upon, then that one issue that we all agree upon, we must all focus on that one issue and implement it. And while we're implementing that one issue, we can be reasoning about the other 99 issues. This is the fundamental principle of goal unity. So that system is what we have been employing. That strategy is what we have been employing. What do we want? We want to effect global unity of the Black race. So whatever we can find in common with as many people of the Black race as possible is what we need to be implementing. So development is repatriation. I prefer to even use the word development as opposed to repatriation. When I say repatriation, people just say, oh, just a Rasta man in my chat. When I say development, people want to hear what I'm talking about. So development are things that we have in common across the board. And most conscious Black people, they want to develop themselves in wherever country they are, and also in Africa, because we are kinsmen, we are brothers. African Americans have that kinship with Africans at home. The same with Black British. That's why even people come and visit Africa, because we know we are Africans. So what we have in common is that, the blood that runs through us, and our common goal to develop Africa, those at home and those abroad, just like how Marcus Garvey used to preach. So through development, it's a common goal. I think we can effect that unity and bring our people together and form this Black world government, which is what the Constitution is. Since slavery, we've never functioned as a nation. Now, because of the invasion of the fascists, the Black people in the West have been given a constitution. This constitution is a modern instrument to effect unity on a global basis. So what we have to do is fulfill that constitution. And basically, its requirement is to establish what we call an international council with an international president. That international president will be able to speak with one voice for the global unity of the Black race. But we've got to get there first. We should have locals all over the world. Any 25 Black people can form a local. And then you apply for a charter from the International Executive Council, which is based in New York, Manhattan, Harlem. Once we have locals spreading all over the world, then we'll have our International Executive Council based in New York with our international president, just like how Obama was president of the United States. Where is the Black race president to speak on the behalf of all Black people of the world, to go and agitate for our true justice, such as reparations? Right now, we're not speaking with one voice. So the perpetrators of slavery, they're not playing any mind to us. They're playing with us, offering us breadcrumbs. Why? Because we're not speaking with one voice. So the solution to all of our problems is our unity. And it has to be on a global basis. So this is what the Constitution of the Ethiopian World Federation is. It's an instrument to effect unity. And that is our goal, unity. Give thanks, Brother Trevor, for the question.
Right. Getting back to our common goal now. I approached you with my project idea. I just wanted to ask you, how do you think that will benefit the learners in Ethiopia?
The benefit is that people will learn a new education, using modern technology, which the youth them is into. They're into all of this modern technology, the mobile apps and the computers. And so this media animation is something that's very interesting to the youth. So I think the benefit is that they will learn a new education, and that can also make them entrepreneurs in that technology, and they can start to create their own businesses and create companies and get employment. Not only that, this media is the publicity that the organization needs, that Ethiopia needs, that Africa needs, because most people in the world, Black people included, still think Africa is the worst place on earth for them to go. Most people still think Ethiopia is a place you'll go and you'll starve to death. Most people think that Africa is full of disease and is a ghetto or is a jungle. So the media animation will help to publicize the beauty of Africa, the beauty of Ethiopia, and the paradise that's waiting for us, and the fact that Ethiopia, Africa awaits its creators and its creation. So I see a lot of benefits coming out of this project, as I said to you from the very beginning, Trevor.
Thank you, Brother Ambrose. I can guarantee you I'm going to do my 100% best for this project. Yeah, you kind of touched on a few more questions that I had to ask, but that's all good. I think you've covered everything now. So back to you, Gavin. I'm
Yes,
happy.
there are loads of questions that we could ask, and we could continue this conversation, but
Yeah.
we don't want to make it too long.
No.
So let's end here and
Yeah.
continue our collaboration and see what comes out of this.
Definitely. It's whatever we want. That's how I see it. But we just gotta get it, because nobody's not giving it to us. So we gotta, in a sense, take it. And that's how I see it. And we got a good team there. So yeah, it's all there to be done. And we just gotta do it. Simple as that.
Okay. Shall we end it there, or would anyone like to say a few words of gratitude, of prayer, as is your tradition, Brother Ambrose?
You can lead us on out on this one.
All right. Let me recite an Amharic Ethiopian prayer. It's the Lord's Prayer. Probably Christians are familiar with Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Well, I recite that Lord's Prayer, as they call it, but in Amharic Ge'ez, the ancient language of Ethiopia. Give thanks. Glory to Word. Glory to sound, glory to the power of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie, Jah, Rastafari. Besamab, Bawol, Bemenfes, Kadis, Ahudam Laksila. Abata Chinhoy, Besamayim et no, Summe Kadis Mengis Timta, Fkad Besamayan Dihonich, Indihu Bemader to Hun, Ya Latin Jira Chinan Setin Zari, Bedela Chinan Yakur Belen. In a bedelin in your current deminal, what a fit nemat gabam, Kafu Udene Inje, Mengistian Tanatna, Hilam Maskanam, Lazalamu, Amen. Rastafari. Give thanks and praises.